Hello, my name is Cheryl Schaefer, and I'd like to introduce my guest today. This is Susan Farese. Susan is a nurse, and she has a military story, and she has a story about creativity that I would like to talk to her about. So this is who our guest is on today's episode of Veterans Helping Veterans TV virtual interview. Hi, Susan. Nice to see you again.
Hi, Cheryl. Great to see you too, always.
Okay, great. So can you tell us a little bit about your military experience? Because yeah, you were not in just one military branch. You actually served in two.
Actually, I started after receiving my bachelor's of nursing and joined the Navy on a buddy system, actually, in late 1970s. And I was stationed in San Diego, which I am in now. So it's funny how life has returned me 10 years ago to the place that I started. So I was a Navy nurse in general medicine and cardiothoracic surgery for those 3 years, and transferred just for paper. It was just a choice to transfer to the Army for the next 9.5 years. So I was a major when I got out in 1990, and I was stationed stateside as well as overseas, and worked in medical surgical, intensive care, recovery room, nursing education, nursing administration, etc. And so I was also got my graduate degree, my master's degree through the military. And after paying back the time, I separated from the service in 1990. So I had a really great 12 plus years, fascinating experiences, different locations, great working in a man's world and learning to live with diverse people. It was just a very, very good experience for me. And I learned leadership, I learned team building,
Would you trade that
being a team
experience?
member.
Would you trade that experience?
No, not at all. Not at all. I grew from it. I grew from it in many, many ways. And it was very valuable to me. Now, today, I'm not sure. Well, I'm not sure I would do the same thing today because things were a little bit different back then. It was more of a peacetime. And I actually didn't know who I was. I was young. I was burnt out in my first job as a nurse, dealing with death as a 20-something. So it helped me grow up and mature. And some life experiences made me mature before my time. But yet I was still immature. So by the time I got out, I felt I knew who I was, and it gave me the experience and the confidence to start life anew.
Well, that's great because I mean, I think anybody that successfully serves in the military, I think that's what they do get out of it. And you learn to think of others first before yourself. And you certainly do that as a nurse, no matter whether you're in the military or a civilian nurse. That's part of the call of nursing.
Right.
And what got you into nursing?
What got me into nursing was the same person that got me into poetry. It was my maternal grandmother. My maternal grandmother passed away very tragically from early Alzheimer's disease, as a result of early Alzheimer's disease. She was only 60 years old when she passed away. So she had Alzheimer's in her 50s. I grew up kind of early and matured because of this. She was my soulmate too. But I would have to visit her with my mom. She was institutionalized because nobody knew what this thing was back then. There were no daycare centers. There was not the support for Alzheimer's, early Alzheimer's especially. So the experience of having a grandmother and being kind of caregivers for her and visiting her made me value something in my heart that wanted to give back and care about people because I cared so much about her. So I guess subconsciously, and also when I was in high school, my counselor and I had a conversation about, what do you think you want to do? And I remember saying, I like people and I like science. Those two things with nursing.
Perfect.
So I went for my bachelor's degree and joined the service right after getting out of college, very, very young.
What's the most traumatic incident you had to deal with while serving in the military?
I was fairly early in my career. Let's see, it was in the early 1980s. And I remember that a soldier was crushed between two tanks. And that was traumatic. I mean, that was traumatic. There were several instances that I don't even want to remember, but it was peacetime, remember? So it was a training accident, and it was very tough. On the other hand, there were positives as well. Always dealing with death is difficult. And I can imagine the nurses today dealing with so much with COVID are really, really having a lot of angst and PTSD and depression and burnout and that kind of thing. And that's one of the reasons I wrote or released the book again this year, because I just feel for nursing.
I'm sure that's an understatement, because it's just so, it's insane what is happening and why people just don't wear the mask and do the right thing. I just don't understand. But meanwhile, that's neither here nor there. The idea here is you had a brilliant medical career and you are outreaching to help this current generation of medical professionals, especially nurses, to cope better with what is going on in our world. Because frankly, for me personally, there ain't enough money in the world for me to be a nurse. Even in my youth, that is not a career I ever considered. Because it really takes a special person, a really kind-hearted, love others before self type of personality to even want to go into nursing and to care for others with everything you have to do in that occupation.
Exactly. Well, at this time, I'm not working clinically as a nurse. I keep my license up, and occasionally I do consulting, but I'm in the communications field now. I'm a publicist and I do PR. I use my nursing process even with clients that are in a non-medical fashion. I assess, I plan, I implement, and I evaluate. So I'm continually a nurse no matter what. And as I go out anywhere, shopping or in my kitchen or to a play, I'm always making rounds with my eyes. I'm always like getting a pulse of what's going on just because of my nursing. So the nursing
and your military background, because
and the military background, absolutely. Looking,
Before I ask you to read your beautiful poem, when you sent me the book and I saw that and I read it, but when I heard you read it, I wanted to ask you to read it for the program, because it's really it's a beautiful poem, but it's at once tragic, because we feel your pain in the words and how you express watching your grandmother's physical and mental decline. It's devastating, but very powerful words, just something I could relate to, because my mother was a World War II veteran and she died at the VA nursing home in Menlo Park. And part of her issue was she also suffered from Alzheimer's. So I could relate to what you were expressing.
So the book is Poetic Expressions in Nursing, Sharing the Caring. And my hummingbird here on the cover is basically my mascot. Here's the back. Because hummingbirds remind me of nursing as well, because we are constantly monitoring others, going from room to room, person to person, and meeting their needs, in medical terms, and just being watchful and showing our care. And when I watch hummingbirds, I've been watching them for several years now. They're just fascinating to watch. So take a look at the hummingbird that you see and just watch how they flutter around so quickly. With that.
Well, with that, I just love the hummingbird philosophy here. And
Exactly.
that's just a perfect way to introduce Anne's Zest.
Anne's Zest Ends, actually, is the name of the poem. Prelude. Her zest for life, boundless energy, a smile a minute so full of glee, remembrances of my grandmother Anne, so significant to me. She ran the show, she was in the know about this or that, nonetheless always on the go. So sharp, so much fun, and so on the ball, how I long to remember and long to recall. Endless walks, sun or snow when I was small, She'd pick me up when my spirit would fall. My first real buddy, my first true friend, her ears and shoulders she'd always lend. If I was sad, my pain I'd spend, but always through her my heart would mend. Intermission. But when I was about 7 in 1963, something in her changed so drastically. She would no longer laugh. She no longer knew me. She would wander about so aimlessly. She would light the fire. Whoops. She would light the gas stove and let the fire run free. Her eyes then would gaze in a wild combat stare. She grew mute and confused. She would pick at her hair. Who is this new stranger taking over her mind? Where did her spirit go? What did it find? From doctor to doctor, this mystery grew. It was 1965 and still nobody knew. To a state institution eventually. Her spirit then faded each day religiously. She grew steadily worse. It took 6 more long years. I would visit her with my mother. We would shed many tears. Day passes were draining. The public would stare. We'd assist her in the bathroom, comb the knots from her hair. I wonder how she felt, personality withered. Did she realize her melt? Were her synapses in a blizzard? Finale. On the 13th of April, 1971, when the hospital called us, 'twas the weight of a ton. She was terminally losing the battle and had wasted away, lost all faculties, not her choosing. She died soon after that day, the next day, actually. I reached for her hand at the bedside to say goodbye, friend, on that fateful day. And she mumbled and stared and connected. She mumbled as if to say, so long for now, Susan. I'm afraid it's time to take my rest, because Alzheimer's drained my life away. But at least you've inherited my zest. Reflections. 20 years later, I weep for the past. Fond memories of Anne. She left the good life so fast. Her suffering, although it was an unfair curse, was the stimulus for me to become a nurse. As I seriously reflect on this draining disease that robs the brain of freedom cells and independence ease, I am angry no definite cause or cure has been found. All the research won't touch the pain that abounds. If I had just one wish that would be granted to me, I'd want to spend a day with Anne, just her and me. Her cheerful style, giving nature so gold, her best features zest, her stature so bold. But who's kidding who? She was taken away in her prime. A true servant of God, strong will, lost mind, signed, one who can still remember. And a little note about that, I wrote this poem in 1991, 20 years after we lost Anne to Alzheimer's disease complications. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. That was powerful.
Thank you.
So that was.
I know it takes,
Takes your
it
breath
brings
away.
Anne back every single time. And I have such compassion for people that are going through it as caregivers as well. Caregiving is, if people are living at home. But back then there were no options. She became unsettling and possible, not threat, but danger to herself and to others when we had her at home. So it was really, really a devastating thing for our family, for my mom especially, being in her 30s at the time. And my grandfather had passed away in 1964. So right as this was happening with my grandfather, she was getting worse and worse. But hopefully the research and time and medications have helped, and there are now daycare services for that. But anyway, this discussion is not just about that. But
Right. Your point is this: a lot of progress has been made since that time she passed,
right.
But also more progress needs to be made. But
always.
We are always learning as we go. That was a very powerful poem, Susan. Very heartbreaking and very relatable, because our family went through something similar with my mother, and she passed away at a VA nursing home in Menlo Park. And she had her issues, but it certainly reminded me of my mother. So they live forever in our hearts.
Absolutely.
And,
Absolutely.
and it's very powerful. And I want you to talk about, I know what you've done in the last few years is you have your own communications company, and you do a lot of empowering of other nurses and medical people to really unlock that creativity for themselves and for veterans, and how it's helped you deal with your own issues. Those are all kind of a bunch of questions all rolled into one.
Well, yes, I will clarify that. For the first of all, I've been in communications since 2011, doing PR for a theater for 5 years, and then 2016 went freelance. So I have worked with theaters, musicians, filmmakers, many authors, and businesses with publicity, PR, and communications, getting the word out for them. For the last two plus years, I've been teaching haiku, but not specifically to nurses or veterans, to the general public at the community, at the county library system in San Diego. So I reached out to many libraries, I developed a program, and I utilize haiku because it's more of a succinct, shorter form of poetry. It's not the literary kind. I use because you can see I'm a photographer, I use my nature photography as prompts in this class, in this workshop, to stimulate people's ideas on what to write as a haiku. So there are many, like there are about 21 photos that I use up on the screen. I do a PowerPoint. I just wanted to clarify that it's not that I do it just for nurses or veterans, it's the general public. So it may be nurses that come, or veterans. And I would like to continue to reach out to veteran groups and definitely nursing groups. In fact, yesterday I met a nurse at my book signing, and I said, why don't you guys invite me to talk to your group, and we can do a haiku session, or I'll just talk about the book and just how valuable poetry is. It doesn't have to be a class, it can just be a discussion. So I am open to that, and I'm open to virtual discussions as well, because it
Very good.
can't go everywhere right now. So until things open up completely, and with the new variants, we don't know where it's going to go. So thank the world for this Zoom and for virtual discussions.
Amen, because that's what keeps me going, to be honest.
Exactly. So, right.
Um,
So haiku is my form of poetry that I trust the most, that I love to teach. And it inspires many people, and it's not, and I've worked with kids too, kids that are middle school and up. But I prefer the adult audience and also the older adult audience. So it doesn't matter. My website has information on that with the haiku workshops. I just think that combined with the photography are using two creative outlets in one. And then what the real clicker is, when I do a class, I invite the folks to share with me, because when you write a poem, you could either throw it away, keep it to yourself, or share it. So the people that would like to share their haiku after a workshop, I combine it and do a blog post about it so that it gets out in the world. So they're published. So it's kind of a thing that has also evolved with these workshops. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Because that's exactly what's happening with us as far as VHB TV is. And with every other creative that I know, is because of the times we're living in, and we're all more or less, especially now, recently, forced to be kind of shut back in the house for a while. How do you keep that creative process going? And I know you don't just do poetry, and I know you don't just take pictures. I also know this about you, that you're a film producer. And I'm really interested in some of the projects that you've worked on, because we know some of the same people. And I'd like to shift gears a little bit here and talk about film production, and what you did in your role as a producer, how many people it takes to produce a film, and your experience earlier this year. I think you told me it was this year, right? You went to the GI Film Festival in San Diego.
Yes.
That must have been awesome, because that's actually presented at the Veterans Museum, correct?
Well, not this year. We had it virtual this year because of COVID.
Right, but normally it's presented at the Veterans Museum in San Diego.
So And I believe it was also at Balboa Park. So it's been in different venues.
Yeah, okay,
So,
okay.
yeah, different venues. So yes, I was fortunate to work with a wonderful team. Actually, in 2019, we were part of the Armed Forces Film Challenge through the San Diego Film Consortium. And we formed a team, 2 male veterans and myself at first, Tommy Anderson and Floyd Strayer and myself. And Tommy wrote the screenplay for Life After Oblivion, which was a short, a 9-minute ultimately, and it might have been different times based on the editing and whatever. But we were part of this film challenge with other people's teams, and we went on to the GI Film Festival. We were the, I believe, the only team of us that went on. And it was fascinating. I ended up producing, casting, doing publicity for, and acting in the film as the psychiatrist. And it's a very interesting, compelling story. And we can put the link up for the website if you'd like also.
Yes.
So that was a great experience. It was a virtual GI Film Festival this year. We got to be on panels discussing the film and how valuable it is for PTSD, for veterans with PTSD to seek treatment. And in this particular film, it's a Marine, and it involves a sniper. I don't want to say the whole thing because
No, we
but
don't want to spoil it for anybody. We just
yeah,
want to let people know the power of film in the creative process,
right,
because that's part of our conversation today is
right,
how do you create? You can do that in really, you can sit down like you've been doing,
right,
writing this beautiful poetry. You can teach others to do what you
right,
get so much pleasure out of.
right,
You can just find something that takes you out of yourself that you can share and say, look, can you help me
yeah,
create this TV show
exactly,
today? Can you
exactly,
help me produce a film? Can you act in my film? Can you do this? Because I've only gotten better with age. And part of the reason for that is because I learned to creatively express myself for
exactly,
myself. And I
exactly.
cannot imagine my life without being creative. And the idea here is if I can do it, you can do it too.
Absolutely.
Because I
Absolutely.
believe in empowerment. And one of the things I wanted to say to you, Susan, is if you're not familiar with some of these outstanding women veteran organizations, let me tell you, because you are an entrepreneur and because you have your own communications company, please, please, please check out the Women Veterans Alliance.
Okay, so as far as Life After Oblivion, we had a certain amount of time to get it done, and we got it done the first weekend, no, the last weekend, I'm sorry, in February. And then the pandemic hit in March. We finished our film. So my point is that us veterans were task oriented enough to get it finished on time, way before everybody else. And then the pandemic hit. It was just phenomenal. We shot it in Bakersfield at what was it, Windwolves Preserve, gorgeous property. And we had, I think it was something like 15 veterans involved in it. It might be higher, and many more volunteers. We also used the airport in Bakersfield, the smaller airport, for one of the scenes. And it was just a phenomenal experience. It brought everybody together. We're very proud of it. And so hopefully it'll go further at some point in time. But we do have a website, and I'll send you the link for that as well.
Okay, well, very good. Well, I happen to know Tom Anderson from the Hollywood American Legion Post. I met him a few times. Man, that man is a rock star. And
He's on fire. He's a
yes,
former
he is on fire.
firefighter too.
Creatively,
Yeah, Tommy
he's
and
knocking
I,
it out of the ballpark. So congratulations to Tommy and his crew, and to you for being a part of all that, because that really is creative expression right there.
absolutely, absolutely. It was very, 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 very good experience for many of us. So thanks for having me share that.
Okay, well, very good. So now, what else would you like to talk about right now?
What would I like to talk about? I don't know. I think women overall need to feel empowered and inspired and confident in themselves and speak up and enjoy life and do something for themselves every day, as well as taking care of others. And I'm right there with you. And if poetry can help you, reach out and we can work out some kind of a workshop. We could do a virtual workshop. I just feel that being creative is a way to combat your fears, your anxieties, your stressors, etc. Something creative. I can't say it enough. Creative passion.
And especially now that everything is kind of reverting back and we're being forced to
Right.
isolate more, and the technology is here. It's on our
Mhm.
phones and it's on these computers and we can do it virtually. Is it perfect and ideal? No, but it works.
Right.
And the
Right.
whole idea is the human connection and the human contact. And really, the whole theme of our discussion today is create, find a way to create something, because it really gives you freedom in a way that, you know, you find, I found my purpose in doing these interviews.
And basically, I was going to say, I love taking pictures of benches. There are many benches out there. Sit down and look outside and look at nature and take pictures of benches. It's very phenomenal. I can't wait to do a gallery of all my benches that I've taken.
Well, since you're talking about benches, let's talk about what's the most amazing connection you made while sitting on a bench with a total and complete stranger.
Ooh, that's a good question. I don't think I sit with strangers on benches, but I do my photography of benches because it helps people to say, why don't I sit here and look? I mostly look at nature if I'm sitting at a bench. I speak to my husband when we're together and we sit on a bench. We take a break from a hike or whatever, you know. Um, but maybe the next time I sit on a bench with somebody, I'll get back to you. Okay, here's a story. So this bonobo had this lizard playing with the lizard for at least 15 minutes, and he ended up letting him go, which was phenomenal. He would toss it up and put it near his mouth, and then he just let it go. And it was just, I couldn't believe I was there to see that. So my point is, take a breath and examine and enjoy and appreciate nature. Appreciate your creativity. Find what you're creative about. Get passionate about it. Don't worry if you're not the best at it at the beginning. Enjoy your life. Life is short. We know that. And move on and carry on.